indicated in the email, there's pizza at the end of it, so there'll be lots of pizza.
What?
So it's good. You have breakfast in the morning,
yeah.
and you're going to have pizza, and I'm going to have your stuff. That's what happens when I am fashionable. So you free food, I don't have to cook. So on the other end of the line is Chris Fairburn. He's with Priority Based Budgeting. He's out of Denver. Started this process a while back. And you guys are the peer review group, and you play an important role. So basically, there are 6 results and 5 attributes. Chris isn't aware that the 5 attributes will be reviewed by the leadership team, the peer review on that one. But the community results, the 6 ones, will be reviewed by you guys. They've already been done. I know Margaret was kind of part of helping out FTSS in the group. And I tried to get everybody involved. Like I have some requests out to childcare, but unfortunately wasn't able, probably because of quota, but I'll just double check. And then the RCMP, and again, because it was staff and clerks, but they're kind of busy and their new person isn't starting. So, but because it's being taped, I might be able to sit down and get involved. Chris will speak to you in regards to the process, but it's a very important process. It's been sent to them, they've done a little bit of a review, then it's coming back. I've got all the Excel spreadsheets, which I haven't printed off, Chris, that breaks out already the grouping. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Chris. You ready, Chris?
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks, Alan, for the introduction. I heard somebody say, look at all those people in the front row, as if they were trying to get the good behavior award. I can't even see anybody. I'm on the webinar. I'm all the way in Denver, Colorado. So no reward even for the people in the front row. Just kidding. Today we're going to talk about the peer review process. And this is really a cool process, a component of your overall work in priority-based budgeting. For many of you, I believe you participated in the scoring process. And if you can imagine, if you didn't participate in it, every program across the entire organization was scored relative to how influential the program is towards what we call basic program attributes. How mandated is the program? How reliant are your citizens on the town to receive a service? And then in addition, and most importantly, and where your work is going to come in, programs were scored relative to each one of your results. And the way that scoring works is that there are 2 steps to it. One is the department self-assessment. So the departments, those who provide the programs themselves, they had the first opportunity to kind of self-assess. They got to score their own programs. They're the subject matter experts. They know the most about the programs. And so it's legitimate for the process to work effectively for the departments to self-assess. But now this is the second component of scoring, which is the peer review. And the whole spirit of peer review is to simply be able to look at the scores that the departments communicated about their own programs and the program's influence relative to results, and be able to ask the question amongst yourselves as essentially an outside perspective, another set of eyes. How do we feel? Do we think that there's cause and effect? Are the departments correct? Would we have questions? If we were trying to describe this to others in our community, do we believe that the case is made that the programs have an influence on those results? And so peer review is a really important step in the process overall, because you get to put a little bit more scrutiny on these scores, ask questions, and begin to substantiate or offer a different point of view on programs and their influence overall. After your work in the peer review process, which I'll get into in the training here, how you provide your opinion and what you submit. But after your work is done in peer review, we get all of the data back at the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting, and we calculate final program scores. You might remember this chart. from some of our earlier presentations, but it was meant to illustrate, this is for a different city. You're going to get a chart that looks similar, where each one of these lines represents a program that you offer and its final score. And we will go through the statistics to say, here are your quartile 1 programs, as differentiated from your quartile 2 programs based on score, as differentiated from quartile 3, and ultimately your quartile 4 programs. And we run the scores in 2 ways. We're going to run the scores and calculate quartiles based solely on the department's perspective. And then we're going to run the scores based on the peer review input and any changes that you suggest in peer review. And then we compare them. And the reason that we do it that way is because in your work in peer review, you might decide to change program scores here and there across the board for a particular program, meaning, back to the previous slide here, even though the department offered a certain set of scores, peer review might come back and say environmental stewardship increased the score, growth and development decreased the score, infrastructure increased, and so on. There might be numerous changes to the scores based on peer review. However, when we sum it all up in the end, if the department's perspective suggested that the program would have ended up in quartile 1, and even with all of the changes in peer review, let's say it falls down to this score, but it's still quartile 1, we say that's actually pretty good. That is agreement. That means all things considered, yeah, there might be some tinkering with the scores. If the department felt that it was quartile 1 overall, and peer review ultimately concluded it was quartile 1, we say there's agreement on the program. What we're looking for, however, is, let's say the department suggested that the program was all the way up here. It's the highest scoring program in the town. And peer review suggests that the program scores 0 points. Every peer review team knocks the program down, or vice versa. The department believed that it was quartile 4, and peer review ranks it all the way to quartile 1. We flag these programs, and we're going to try to take one more look at those. That's what we're going to try to do as a result of your work. So rest assured, those of you who participated from the department side on program scoring, that we're going to be really looking at the programs from these 2 different perspectives. And also rest assured from your work in peer review, and I'll really emphasize this at the end, don't be afraid of changing scores, because we are going to look at them from both perspectives and try to understand why there might be any sort of differences. And of course, we're going to point out where the opinions are in agreement with each other. After we're done kind of vetting out any changes from peer review, we assemble every program in every quartile along with all of the program costs so that we can produce for the first time for you, again, this is not you, you're almost at this step, we'll produce an array of where your current resources are being allocated by quartile, and this really kicks off the real fun in using your priority-based budgeting data to make different decisions. So with that little bit of a roadmap of where we're headed next, the rest of the focus of today's workshop is how do you participate in peer review? So I'm going to walk you through, it's a pretty simple workshop, but I'm just trying to coach you on the expectations overall and how you might go about your work as you begin to work in your teams. So first overall concept that's kind of interesting is in the departmental self-assessment of program scores, the departments were taking their own program list and they were scoring them against every single one of the categories, almost like they were taking a horizontal perspective as they were looking across the plane of a single program. It was program-centric, and looking at everything that they could possibly communicate about that program, how it impacted basic program attributes, and how the program impacted all of your results overall. Whereas in peer review, your teams are siloed. You're taking more of a vertical perspective where it's result-centric, not program-centric, it's result-centric. You're going to participate on a result team, and you know nothing else about the program except for how it scored against your result, and this is totally intentional. the whole idea here is that we want you to become very familiar with just your result that you're reviewing. And no matter where the programs come from, I know it's a tough chart to read, but this is similar to what your template will look like. You'll have all of your programs listed here, and you'll be able to look at how they scored relative to just your result. And that's how you're going to begin to make your recommendations. So that's just kind of globally. You're moving from looking at each individual program and everywhere it's scored to now you're just looking at a single set of scores relative to your result overall. Just some basic expectations of your team. First and foremost, for the result team that you are participating on, you're going to become really familiar with the result map. I think most of you know what I'm talking about when I describe the result map. It's and we can show some at the end if you kind of forget, but it's the main tool that you'll use as you go through this work. It had the result in the center and all of the different definitions for that result going around it. While in scoring, the departments probably became very familiar with each result map. Now in peer review, you're going to get really interested in each one of those definitions. And it's a helpful thing to talk to your teammates about the definitions. Does everybody interpret this result map the same way? That's usually a really good place to start, is just thinking through and talking out loud about the result definitions that you have and coming to agreement on interpretation. The way that the peer review templates are actually set up, they're in order from the programs that appear to have the highest score relative to your results. Remember, a score of 4 meant that there was a high degree of impact. Same with a score of 3, also a very high degree of impact. Scores of 2s and 1s were a lesser degree of impact, but still some contribution towards the result. And then 0s were no impact whatsoever. So your template is actually ordered from highest influence to lowest influence. And we'll go through some of the reasons why. It tends to just be easier for the group to talk through programs that appear to have a higher influence first, and then work your way down to more of the nebulous case, where even the departments felt like, there's something to do with achieving the result. So it'll make your work easier. Another part of your role is simply to understand at a basic level, what does the program do? So you're going to be reviewing all of these programs and services, and we're not asking you to become subject matter experts in each and every program and service, but you should have a general understanding of what the program is about. Like, what happens as a result of providing this program? What do we do? So you're free to ask questions just to make sure you have that basic level understanding of what the program provides. And then finally, quite simply, you're making a recommendation. You're going to see the score that the department gave for the program. It's on your template. So you're not starting from a blank slate. You're going to actually see the score that they gave. And your job is simply to say, we agree with the department's score after we've talked about it, or we don't agree and we're making a new recommendation to either increase the score or decrease the score based on the discussions that your team has had. Now, as you go through your work, it's absolutely okay to ask for more information. So I'll walk you through at the very end of our presentation today, kind of a suggested choreography, a way for you to go through it. But along the way, if you have questions for the departments as to why they gave the program the score that they did, it's totally okay and absolutely encouraged to ask for more information. For instance, as you see here in these first few points, it might be the case that by program name, it is not evident what the program is all about. And you want to ask for more information before you come to a conclusion. Totally okay. Ask for more information if you don't know what the program is actually providing. The second bullet point, let's say you're looking at a program and it's just baffling to your team. How did the department give it this score? It just doesn't make sense to us. Why would they believe that this program has so little influence on the result? Or why would they believe that this program has such a high degree of impact on this result? Then it's totally okay to ask the department for more information. I'll just give you a quick kind of funny example. In our early work, we had a coroner's office who described death investigations, vehicular traffic accidents that resulted in death. Not only did they give that program a high score relative to safe community, but they gave that program a high score relative to effective transportation. And the effective transportation result team, as they were looking at this program, going, how does death investigations, that was the name of the program, improve our traffic network, our mobility options? So they asked the coroner, said, why would you give this program such a high score? And the coroner's office came back and said, when there is an unfortunate situation where there's a death as a result of a traffic accident, we have to go out to the scene. We have to shut down traffic and actually perform part of our investigation right on the spot. And we have enough of these types of accidents where we actually impact traffic flow. It's a problem in certain areas. The peer review team for transportation, they weren't compelled overall to give it a 4, the highest degree of impact on the transportation-oriented result. But it opened their mind. They said, oh, wow, we had no idea that traffic gets stopped when you have to go out and perform your investigation overall. So just a simple example of the team going, I think I know what the program provides, but I have no clue why they would give it such a high score for the result. These are the types of questions that we hope that you ask as you move your way through the work. Deciding as a team, ultimately, your job is to come to some level of consensus as to whether or not you agree with the score that the department gave or you agree with a change in the score overall. You're ultimately just submitting one set of recommended scores overall. Common questions that we'll get from a peer review team is, what happens if you disagree? What happens if the majority of the teammates feel one way and a couple others feel a different way? There's no rule set in stone. Democratic rules, majority rules, that's a good way to go about it. If you're truly on completely different sides of the fence, half the team feels like the program should score a 4, and the other half feels like the program should score a 0. That's, I don't know if I would say majority rules. To me, that would indicate there's more information to gather about this program. If you completely disagree about its overall impact, when you get down to half your team feels like it's a 4 and a couple members feel like it's a 3, that's more reasonable and more likely for your work. You probably don't need more information. You probably just have to say majority wins and move forward with a score. There's no averaging of the scores. If half the team feels like there's a 4, other half feels like there's a 3, you can't submit a 3.5. So you got to go one way or the other. Sometimes we see some wild calculations come back in the peer review sheets, and they calculate the definition of pi to like 21 digits or something like that. But that is just try to move towards one score or the other. Sometimes as we go through the training, it's helpful to describe not only what your role is to do, but sometimes it's helpful to describe where you might get yourselves into trouble, what your role is not to do, just to keep you on the right path. So we list these just as examples of things that almost every peer review team gets into, and we're trying to steer you out of it just to make your time as efficient as possible. So one thing that might happen in your work is that as you're reviewing it, someone might ask the question, are these the right results? Like, are we missing a result overall? Should we have added a result to our overall work? And you might be right. That might be a very astute observation. And if you have an observation like that, report it back to Alan or Mark that, hey, as we move forward in this process, it occurred to us that we might be missing a result overall. And if that takes place, that's fantastic to note it, but it's not your specific duty in this peer review process, and it's almost a distraction. So try to stay focused as best you can on just your result, your definitions in the programs that you're reviewing. Very similarly, your team might get caught up as you're starting to look through the definitions around your result map. Someone might say, I think this program actually has a huge impact on this result. It's just that we're missing a result definition overall. Again, that might be the case. Report it back to Alan, report it back to Mark, take note of it in your process overall. But you got to assume that the department scored their programs relative to results as they are currently defined. Your elected officials approve the result definitions for this year. So we have to, at least for now, take it that these specific definitions are the definitions to move forward with. So you might be right. The definitions might need editing, or you might be missing a definition that you want to reconsider, but you'll reconsider it in future years, not for your task right now. Third point, so this is the reason why we silo the teams, is we want to make your life easy. We just want you to focus on one question. Do the programs that you're reviewing have an influence on the result, and how do you feel about the department scores? But here's what sometimes happens. You will be reviewing a program and the department gave it a high score relative to your result. However, it doesn't feel comfortable. You're looking at the program and you're thinking to yourself, wow, this program got a high score relative to our result, but I don't think this program overall across the entire town is a high priority. And when your mind starts to do that, you almost arbitrarily want to reduce the score of that program for your result, because you're going, I don't want it to get away with this high score, because overall it has to be a low priority for the town. So you're thinking about how the program scored elsewhere. Try not to do that, because it could be that the program scored zeros in all other results, and the final score will take care of itself. That's what the other teams are working on. So just stay focused on your program and your result, and the rest of the scores will take care of themselves. And it works the other way, too. You might be looking at a program against your result, and the department gave it a low score, but in your mind, you're going, but I know this is a high priority. Therefore, arbitrarily, your tendency is, I want to raise the score relative to my result area, and just stray from doing that. Don't do that. The other scores against the other results are going to take care of themselves. That's related to this point as well. And then finally, this is also related. It's just natural. You might be looking at the program, and let's say the department gave it a high score. However, as you're really thinking about it, and as your team is contemplating the program, you think, yeah, the program has a high degree of influence on our result, but I think we can do this program a lot more efficiently if we did it a different way. And when your mind starts to think that way, you almost have a tendency to lower the score, because you're thinking, I think we could do this program more efficiently. We don't need as many resources. Therefore, I want to force the system to decrease the overall priority of the program. Again, don't do it. Just stay focused on, does the program have the influence on the result that the department says, or do you make a different recommendation? Efficiencies will come up later on in the process as you begin to use the tools. Just stay focused on the task at hand. All right. Overall format. And Alan, this is just our general overview. I know that there is definitely some flexibility as you've constructed the result teams. But the idea is to have one result team for each one of your results. And as you perform your work, it's always helpful to have somebody tasked essentially as a facilitator, just to stay organized. The role of the facilitator might be to take the lead in organizing team meetings. The role of the facilitator might be to take notes as your team is having discussions, certainly to reach out to the departments as your team has questions to go through. And it's not to say that the facilitator can't take place in the discussions or the debate around program scores. They absolutely can. It's just really helpful to have somebody take on that role. ultimately you're submitting one final set of recommendations for your team. So it's not that each team member has to come up with their own scores and their own recommendations and you submit them all. You're just tasked with coming up with one set of recommended scores. And then, as I was describing earlier, we're going to run the scores both ways from your perspective in peer review, as well as the perspective of the departments alone. And that is to make sure that we're really tracking, is there agreement between the scores, or is there vast disagreement between some of the program scores? Typically, just so you have some idea, for the 120 plus organizations who have gone through this, we see a small percentage of programs that end up being really interesting because there's such a difference of opinion, and those are worthy of pursuing further conversation. It's usually not a large percentage. But here's what gets really intriguing about it. In your work in peer review, it's so helpful at this point to be able to go back to the facilitator and say, can you give a little bit of extra information on why your team decided to change the score the way that you did? We're interested. And then we're going to ask the same question to the departments. How did you score this program the way that you did overall? And it's great to have some sort of backup, some notes. It's also great to have notes as you move from one year to the next and your teams continue to talk about scores and influence overall on results. The more that you're learning about programs at this point, all of that information continues to be useful. At the very end, again, the last slide that I'll show is a recommended approach to your meetings. And we can also talk about timeline. We see for the meetings that generally take place, sometimes breaking these out over the period of 2 to 3 weeks can be really helpful. But you can judge your own time. I'll demonstrate, again, the effective way that we've seen other teams work through their process before. All right, I wanted to go through a couple of examples and describe some pitfalls that peer review teams get themselves into, or just areas where they get stuck, and how you might consider working your way out. And for those who went through the program scoring process, you'll recognize these questions. These are very similar questions, experiments that we proposed to the departments to help them think through their program scores. So we're bringing them back up in peer review because they tend to be equally helpful. So you have to imagine you're talking with your team and you're just stuck reviewing a particular program. So you're not agreeing on the program score and you don't know what to do. It's at this point that this type of exercise might be helpful. Ask yourself the question, okay, imagine that we don't provide this program any longer, that it's totally gone. And now let's look at our result map. If we did that, if we stopped providing this program 100%, what impact would it have on the result, essentially? Would it be really difficult for us to achieve the result? And if so you're imagining the program is gone and you're looking at your result map and you go, yeah, it's going to be very difficult for us to achieve this result, then you automatically know that the program should be probably a 3 or a 4. It's a high degree of impact overall. If, on the other hand, you're looking at the result map and you're going, it would have some degree of impact, certainly some, but not a high degree of impact. It would be noticeable, but not a tremendous degree of impact. Then you know it's got to be probably a 1 or a 2. There's some influence there. And finally, if you're imagining that this program is no longer provided and you're looking at your result map and you're just going, it would have 0 impact on our ability to achieve this result, then you know it's a 0. That's how your team feels overall. This has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to actually eliminate the program. It's just a way to reverse or walk around the issue so you can truly understand cause and effect between the program that you're offering and the result. It's a different way. And actually, this is really helpful, this slide 13, as you are starting your work in peer review. What we see sometimes is you're starting to really understand your result map, but it takes some practice. And truly, what we see often in the peer review teams is that it takes a little while to get into a groove, to get the momentum rolling, and that's totally okay. So what we see teams do sometimes is they take the result map, and if you remember, there's several different bubbles around the map, several different result definitions, and they'll take the program that they are working on and actually read the definitions out loud, asking themselves for each specific definition, does the program help us accomplish that definition? So they'll read result definition number 1 and go, does this program help us influence this definition? And they'll talk about that. Then they'll move on to definition number 2, ask the same question, talk about it, result definition number 3, and so on. And what this does is 2 things. 1, it makes your team very aware of the definitions, and it also brings to light where you might interpret the definitions slightly differently. But then what it also does, the more definitions that your team is agreeing that the program achieves, then you're already starting to come to some conclusion that, yeah, this program probably has a high degree of impact overall on the result. It's probably a 3 or a 4. Or as you're reading through all the definitions, you conclude the program only achieves 1, kind of. Then you know that program is probably going to get a 1 or a 2, a low degree of impact. And if it doesn't achieve any, as you move all the way around each definition, then of course you're going to give it a 0. The only drawback to this approach is we try to encourage you, try not to make it formulaic. In other words, if your result had 4 definitions, and throughout your discussions, if it meets 1 definition, your formulaic approach would be to give it a 1. If it meets 2 definitions, you'd give it a 2. 3 definitions, you give it a 3. We say try not to do that, and the only reason is because all result definitions aren't necessarily created equal. It's not that if it achieves 1 definition, it's a small degree of influence. You might decide that, yeah, it only achieves 1 definition, but that definition is so crucial to this result overall that you want to give it a high degree of impact, a 3 or a 4, even though it only met 1 definition overall. So my only counsel, again, is just to not make it formulaic. All right, so those last 2 slides were to try to help you if you're stuck, just to go through some exercises to move forward as a team. But a few additional pointers here, and we see this, and these are pretty interesting. This very first one, don't be afraid of changing a score. Here's what we've seen from some of the peer review teams, and especially in the early days, we would do some follow-up interviews with those who participated. And this is really interesting. We'd hear like a psychological reaction from some participants who would say, I was uncomfortable reducing the department score because I was afraid if I make that program's score go down, then the program overall is going to get scored lower. It's going to get ranked quartile 4. If it gets ranked quartile 4, the program's going to get cut. And if the program's going to get cut, people are going to lose their jobs. It's like, wow, you just connected a lot of dots that you're absolutely not in control of happening. If you change a program score, it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that the program falls to the bottom, gets cut, and everybody loses their job. It's not at all. There's so much more conversation that needs to take place before any programmatic changes are going to be recommended. This is just to get the context of how influential the programs are against results. Or the converse, someone would say, I was equally afraid of changing a score, of increasing the department score, because I didn't want that program to vault to the top of quartile 1, get all the money. If they get all the money, my program is going to get cut, and there was like a self-interested sabotage going on. The whole point is just stay true to the system, just looking at your programs and its score relative to the results, and that will make this process totally successful. And it's not on your shoulders, the ultimate fate of the program. It's just to help us move into this next phase of context. We do say concentrate on those programs that appear to have a high degree of influence first, those 4s and 3s. And the reason is we could have done it differently. We could have said, start with the programs that scored 1s and 2s, a low degree of impact. The programs that the departments feel have a low degree of impact, the programs that the departments have given a score of 1 or a 2 relative to your results, are complex. It's harder to talk about them because you're already starting with, the departments feel like it has some degree of impact, but it's unclear. They're just harder programs to start with. Therefore, we've seen it work so much more smoothly when you're starting with the programs that the departments already feel have a strong impact on the result, and then you work your way down towards those programs that have less of a degree of impact overall. The flow is better. It's just easier for you. That's why the templates have been set up as they are, and that's how we encourage you to go through the work. Finally, it says fill in the final column on your peer review worksheet. This is just a template issue, but your worksheet's going to look something like this, where you have all of the programs listed, you have descriptions where they've been provided, you have the department score listed here, and then in yellow highlight are the empty cells that we're looking for you from your peer review team to fill in these cells. And this is just really simple, but sometimes we'll get a peer review worksheet back and the cell is empty. There's been nothing written there, and it's actually your peer review team's intention to agree with the department score. So you leave it here as if to communicate, yes, we recommend no change. We're not changing anything in the cell. And yet, as we read the data back, the tool says a blank is the equivalent of a 0. So that's not at all what you intended to do, is downgrade this program from a 4 to a 0. But if you leave it blank, that's how we're going to read it. So we simply say, just whatever you are recommending for your score, just fill in the cell overall in the template. And when you're done, you turn it in and your peer review team's work is complete. All right, I talked about kind of an overall meeting schedule or meeting approach. This is not meant to be rigid, but it's just a great way to schedule your meetings to make your way through the work as efficiently as possible. Bottom line, what you see down here in red, we say try to make your meetings no longer than an hour to 2 hours, hour and a half to 2 hours max. And the reason is because anything longer than that, it starts to get distracting and tiring, and you're getting less bang for your buck overall in the effort. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Just sneezing. Like we had seen early on, we had worked with a couple of peer review teams that wanted to try to get all of their work done in a single day, in just one sitting. And we thought, oh, wow, this could be pretty interesting. And what happened was, in the first hour or two, the teams were on fire. They were highly caffeinated. They were doing great work. They're asking tremendous questions. The level of dialogue and conversation was tremendous. And then after about the second hour, the first distractions were around, no one had checked their email for a while, and you have to start taking breaks, and you start to think about other work they need to get done. About the fifth or sixth hour, the new objective was not trying to come up with thoughtful discussions about program scores. The new objective was, how do we get out of here? I will agree with whatever the score is just so we can finish up our work. And they had to revisit their entire effort. So it seemed like, why would you meet for 6 hours trying to finish it all? They didn't have time to meet with all the departments. It tied up the organization. So we said, great idea to try to finish it in one day. But it was just so overwhelming and challenging. We've seen it work a lot better if you can break up the meetings. And here's how we've seen it done really well. If in meeting number one, the basis of the conversation is you're talking about your result map. So you're going to talk about those result definitions. Hopefully you've read them as you come into the workshop training to begin with. And you can have some discussion. Before we launch into our work, does everybody kind of understand the definition of our result? Do we have any questions? We want to talk it through for various ways that we might interpret it. That's a great place to start. The second part of this very first meeting is to literally go through pretty much every program, if you can, every single program on your peer review worksheet, and you're not having an in-depth discussion at all. You're having a simple conversation. You ask the question out loud, do we agree on this score? And if everybody says yes, then you already know, great, we can put these programs aside. We don't need to talk about them. We've already finished our work. We agree with the department score. The remainder of the programs will fall into two categories. So the idea is the remainder of the programs are those that you did not agree. So you're either in a position where you disagree with the department score and you need to talk about it a little bit further, or you're uncertain. You need more information from the department. You don't know whether or not to agree. You might agree, but you need more data. And it's for that group of programs where you need more data and you intend to reach out to the departments that we say, have the facilitator mark these programs and reach out to the departments. Email is best. And simply jot down an email to each department to say, here are the programs that we're looking at, and here are the questions that we are considering. We don't know what the program we don't know what the program does. We don't understand why you gave it the score that you did. Keep your questions simple so the departments can respond. We find most often the questions that you're asking the departments can be answered through email. And that's the best, just keep this as efficient as possible. Other times, it's beyond an email, and the department might say, I would be happy to come and talk to your peer review team and describe a little bit more about what this program does, or describe to you why we gave it the score that we did. Maybe it's just like the coroner's office program where a little bit of explanation would really help your team. So the idea is between meeting 1 and meeting 2, you are reaching out to the department, trying to get the questions on the table such that by the time meeting 2 takes place, for any department that actually needs to come and talk to your group, make that the focus of meeting 2. They're going to hear from the departments. They're going to make some level of presentation and try to answer your questions. Keep these succinct. If you're inviting a department to come in, it's not a 45-minute presentation. It's a 5-minute explanation at most. And then after they make their presentation, it's not as if your team and the department are now going to try to talk together and negotiate a final score. No, it's just information gathering. So you're just there to listen, say thanks, the department's done, and you hear from the next group. So meeting number 2, you're just getting information in, you're listening to presentations, and then either with the remainder of meeting 2 or carrying over into a third meeting, you're also distributing any email responses that the departments provided where you were asking questions. It's just a good way to do it. So your meeting 2 and meeting 3 are just learning more and more about the programs where you weren't totally certain with the score that was given, such that by meeting 4, your team gets back together and you try again. You have now learned so much about these programs. It's just kind of like the first meeting. Can you go through and now come up with a recommendation for the final program score, or agree with the department score, or recommend something else? You're trying to now push through towards conclusion with everything that you've just learned. And if you can complete that in meeting 4, then your 5th meeting, if necessary, you're done with your work. You've already scored all the programs. The 5th meeting tends to be helpful as the team kind of takes a step back and checks yourself for consistency. Basically, you're looking at all the programs that you gave 4s, all that you gave 3s, 2s, 1s, and even 0s, and you're just challenging yourselves. Have we been consistent overall in our approach? And what happens sometimes is you're looking at your 4s and your 3s and you go, man, I think we were really lenient in the beginning, or we were really harsh in the beginning, either way. And we were downscoring programs like crazy. And then we kind of got our momentum and we really came to agree on the result map. And you'll be able to tell, because you'll look at your scores and it'll be clear where there's a shift that took place in your overall assessment. So we say that's your final meeting. Just challenge yourselves. It's kind of like the relativity test. You're just looking at relative to each of the programs. Are all 4s looking like 4s? Are all 3s looking like 3s? And you go through that work. you submit your final answers, and you're done. Your peer review effort is complete, and hopefully none of these meetings last longer than an hour and a half to 2 hours, and your overall effort is successful. So that was kind of a crash course and some tips, overall expectations of peer review, your role, talking a little bit about places where we've seen the teams get bogged down a little bit and some techniques to work your way out, and a recommended kind of choreography or schedule to the meetings. So Alan, I'll turn it back to you just to see how everybody's doing in the room and if there are any questions.
So any questions? Questions? So I have to step out for a second, Chris. Were we going to be going over the community results, or have you already done
that? In the packet, we have each one of the result maps. So depending on everybody's team, they can certainly go through. That was the instruction was in your first meeting. That's what I'm instructing the teams to do, is to go through and really become familiar with their result maps.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Dan. Yeah, if you can just go over quickly, there's some questions in regards to the result map. Most of these people, with the exception of a couple, weren't involved in the original result. There's only, I think, 2 people in the 17 that are here that went through the result map. So if you can just quickly go over each one of them. They haven't been assigned to each result yet. I'm going to do that after this meeting and start it off and go from there. But if you can just quickly explain how result works and just a quick on the ranking. You don't have to touch the attributes, just on the community results.
You bet. You bet. And thanks for clarifying that. So for those of you, I've been referring to these result maps and result definitions a number of times throughout the presentation. And here's what I mean. And just like Alan said, you're going to be assigned to one result team or another result team. And my emphasis throughout the presentation was become totally familiar with your result map. Here's a result map. This is an example. If you are on the environmental stewardship team, these are all of the definitions for environmental stewardship that were used in the process as the departments scored their programs. In priority-based budgeting, kind of all the way back to the beginning, the town established results, environmental stewardship being an example of a result, inclusive, diverse, and welcoming family-oriented community with a strong French heritage is a result. Managed, well-planned, smart growth, and diversified development is a result. And all of these bubbles that you see around the map are the agreed-upon definitions for how this result is achieved. And so as the departments went through that step 1 self-assessment for program scoring, as they were trying to communicate how influential their programs are towards achieving a result like recreational culture and leisure opportunities, they used these definitions as a way to communicate. So if I was going to say my program, or I'm asking myself the question, does my program overall impact this result of recreational culture and leisure opportunities, I had to carefully consider each of these definitions and ask, does my program influence this? And if so, that's how I'm going to make my case that my program has an impact overall on the central result. So just reading a couple out loud, ensures the protection, long-term sustainability, and enjoyment of its public lands, open spaces, parks, and other natural resources. If I believe that my program influences this, then I have a gateway, I have a case to make that my program influences the central result, because this is one of the definitions. Another definition was promotes a healthy lifestyle, by providing convenient, safe, accessible, and well-maintained parks, biking trails, walking paths, and other outdoor recreation venues for all ages and abilities. If I'm looking at this definition and saying the program that I'm providing actually does this, then that's another way I'm going to communicate that, yeah, my program really has an impact on this central result. So for your work in peer review, the idea is that you're all going to be assigned to one result team or another result team, and you're reviewing all of the programs that appear to have an influence on your result. Again, starting with highest degree of impact programs, working your way down. And the idea is for any and all programs that you're looking at, you get the benefit of looking at the department score, and you're simply asking yourself, wow, given these definitions, do we agree with the department score, or would we recommend a change? All of these definitions only relate to the result that you're working on. That's what a result map. Some people call these cause and effect diagrams, where this is the cause, is the fact that our program offers safe, well-maintained mobility alternatives for pedestrians and cyclists that are accessible and connected. If my program does this, that's a cause to the effect of a reliable infrastructure and effective mobility overall across the town. So these result maps are really key overall to your work, and they're diverse. I think you'll find it really interesting, especially, Alan, with what you just said, that this might be the first time that you're looking at these definitions. Read through these and really think through. These are all the ways that a program can show influence on this result. It's meant to minimize everybody's personal opinion. It's meant to minimize subjectivity. We've come to agreement on all of these definitions for your particular result, and that's how the result map ends up getting used overall. Is that helpful, Alan?
Yes, that is. Is there any other questions? Sure.
Just, I'm thinking if we're going to be doing the program, could we have the age? Are we allowed to have that?
We'll discuss that. Yeah, once Chris is done, I'll have a quick discussion with you guys in terms of the next steps in the process.
Thank you.
So is there any other questions on Chris's presentation? All right, Chris, we're done.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. I hope that you really enjoy it. If there's anything else, we heard one group kind of talk about, if you've seen these commercials, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas kind of thing. We've heard the same thing applied to what happens in peer review stays in peer review. It's a fun opportunity to... I know we're making it a lot more glamorous than it probably is in peer review, but the idea is you're given the opportunity, like you might not have in your normal day-to-day work, to really act like a elected official or to act like a citizen and take a step all the way back and really think through, wow, for this program that we're considering, does it make us safer? How would we know? What questions would we have? And we've seen people really have a good time with this. You're being investigators. You're really trying to prove causality. And you really learn a lot about the organization as you go through it. So thanks again for participating in peer review. Thanks for being a part of this morning's webinar. Alan, I will send you the recording so that you can distribute it to everybody. And certainly as you go through the work and you have questions on how to interpret a result or a program, that's what we're here for as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out through Alan to ask us questions. But enjoy your work, and thanks again, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.